Who is it?
It's Jonathan.
How do I know this is really Jonathan?
Let me in right now or I'll scream so loud they all hear me.
Oh, okay, it's Jonathan. Come on, before this...
Alright, okay. What's going on here?
This last place that they don't seem to have, breached yet. Everywhere else is just compromised.
Yeah.
The whole city's going to shit, man.
Yeah, it is. Give me the wine. Thank you. Oh.
Yeah. No. The only thing left we can do right now, I guess, is just get drunk, right?
Yeah. I went to the Temple of Palor. They were... screams.
Don't try to think about it, man.
I figured this had nobody think to come here, and it looks like, yeah.
Yeah, it's just you and me, man. Just you and me.
Yeah. Where's Sarah?
What do you mean?
Where's Sarah? Where's your wife?
She's dead, man.
How'd she die?
She got taken by one of the monsters.
Your wife, Sarah, got taken by one of the monsters?
Yeah, like everybody else.
No. I helped bury your wife 3 years ago. How am I gonna die?
I think you know the answer to that. Don't you, John?
Welcome to the RPGBOT.Podcast. I'm Randall James, your, dead guy. With me is Tyler Kamstra.
Hi, everybody.
And Random Pal.
Good evening.
And today we have a special guest, Ash.
Hi, I'm Ash of Crit Fails. We also are a podcast of D&D shenaniganery. I guess that's a word. Not as professional as this podcast. It's more of us just talking bullcrap about how we failed in our D&D campaigns. But please check us out. Our Twitter's at crit_fails. And you can find us on Spotify or iTunes or wherever podcasts are found.
Awesome. Yeah, I think
good to be here.
Absolutely. It's good to have you. It's going to be great. Yeah, I think we definitely had our case of failures in the past. Absolutely. And we had Colby on several weeks ago as well, who's also from Crit Fails.
Correct.
So yeah, absolutely. Good to have more of the gang on.
Yeah.
So Tyler, what are we doing today?
Well, it's Spooktober. We're going to talk about horror.
Nice.
Ooh. And this is a challenging episode for me personally, because horror is a place where I, both as a player and as a DM, struggle a whole lot. So I'm actually hoping to learn a lot from the rest of these fine folks on the podcast today.
Nice. Yeah, this has been an episode I've been super excited about the whole time. So what are we on? This is episode 9, the 10th episode. Is that right? I'm getting some thumbs up.
This is episode 10, the 11th episode.
Oh, okay. No, I'm sorry. Yeah. So this is episode 10, the 11th episode.
Right. Because you guys have episode 0, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. We do 0 indexing here. It's the right thing to do.
That's the proper programming way to do it.
100%. No MATLAB users here. But yeah, so this is the 3rd episode of Spooktober. I've been looking forward to this for over a month since we first started talking about it, and I can't tell you how excited I am. I think probably a good way to start this conversation is to talk about what content does exist within 5th edition that really brings the horror.
So I think the first thing that everyone's going to think of in 5th edition D&D is going to be Ravenloft.
Yeah, I was just going to say, yeah.
Yeah, Ravenloft has been kind of part of the D&D canon since 2nd edition, with the original Castle Ravenloft module, and now with Curse of Strahd and Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. The Gothic-style horror has been kind of a fixture in D&D for longer than I've been playing.
Mm-hmm.
The most modern guidance on how to do a horror game is Van Richten's Guide to Ravenloft. And if you don't have a copy, there is a section in the book that explains just how to run horror. It's pretty easy to overlook. It's only about 6 pages, starts on page 185, but it's actually really good DM advice for how to run a horror game, how to set expectations, how to respect boundaries, how to make your game spooky while still making it fun. And of course, there's always the challenges of how do you scare people in D&D.
Yeah, I think to dive a little bit further into this, right? What it's really calling out is like you want the environment to be scary and spooky, and you want in the moment your players to have the gratification of horror, but you don't want to make a player feel like either personally attacked or essentially you don't want it to be something that they take home at night and can't sleep that night. Unless everybody at the table explicitly says that's exactly what they're looking for. And once again, we won't yuck your yum. Yeah, party on.
To figure out how to do that, I think it's really important to look at the types of fear. There's different ways to scare people. And in the most basic, you're going to look at it as like, okay, well, maybe I've experienced something being unsettling versus something being like a jump scare. That's a good place to look at it from the start. But there's actually like some real concrete definitions. And some of these types of fear work better than others. So malaise, something just like kind of not right, kind of off in the back of your head. This is really like what I like to think of as like uncanny valley. You walk into a town and you see only children, no adults. That's not the way a town's supposed to run. You know that that's not the way a town's supposed to run, but you can't figure out why.
Also, children are creepy. Like,
inherently, it's true.
Also, like a good example of that is like Shadow Brainsmith by H.P. Lovecraft. You know, guy comes in, bunch of strange, fishy type of people, just a malevolent sort of vibe.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So actually, I had a module that I was interested in running through right quick just to talk about how we can, like, an example of bringing malaise. Do you folks want to do it?
Sure.
All right, short, sweet. It won't take too long. Okay, so imagine a setting where you're in a town, you don't know anybody in the town, and the town is kind of far out in the middle of nowhere. No one even knew this town was here, and yet you find yourself in a room with a bunch of the townsfolk. Okay. You're in a room. The room is aged but elegant with solid plank flooring. The molding is intricate but aging and dirty. A fire crackles in the hearth, providing the only light in the room. There are shelves on each side of the fire lined with books. The men and women are dressed oddly. Your only thought that it's as if someone described to a poor tailor the modern style of dress clothing, fine clothing, and this is what they come with. They talk quietly amongst themselves, ignoring you except for short, accusatory glances. Roll perception. Nobody has dice on them, right?
Clatter, 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 clatter.
So what happens when you have everybody in the room roll dice, right? Somebody's going to break 10. You know, you can call that a success. You can nod happily and you can keep going with it. Although it's late in the day, the men in the room appear to be freshly shaved. Maybe to another person, you notice the books on the shelves have no words on the binding. They appear to be sorted by color. Before you can decide what to do, all heads snap to look at an open doorway. A second goes by. 2 seconds. 3 seconds. A woman enters dressed like the others. The room returns, talking in their quiet circles.
Yeah, okay, that's weird.
Yeah.
It's definitely headed towards spooky, but I almost feel like that's even a great segue. That doesn't really read like vaguely not right, because you're in a specific situation. You're in this room. You're surrounded by these people who are explicitly aware of your presence. That honestly almost starts hitting more like anxiety. Now, anxiety is one of the great things that as a DM, you have a lot of tools to build.
Yeah.
You know, just like a few things that I have come across and done. And one thing that I'm going to touch on real quick. Humans love pattern recognition. We're actually too good at it. This is where you get these medieval stories of superstitions about like, oh, it's a comet. I need to sacrifice 3 goats or I'm going to have a bad harvest. That immediate desire for pattern recognition is what makes malaise and to some extent anxiety possible. Preying on that is how you're going to be able to generate these sorts of fears in your players really well. So pattern recognition, right? As players, when we see our DM do something that we can see, we expect it to be meaningful. And sometimes that's just, I'm going to roll a handful of dice behind my screen and not tell you what I'm doing. The answer is scaring you. It has no mechanical effect, but just roll some dice. Take a sand timer, like a 5-minute sand timer if you can find one, and just casually set it out in front of the players as they're talking. Don't tell them anything.
But at the end of it, though, then roll the dice again and like.
It's interesting that you bring up the idea of pattern recognition when it comes to horror, because I think that is true in different ways. People can have anxiety in a pattern when they recognize a dangerous situation, sort of like they're in a dark hallway. Nothing good ever happens in a dark hallway. I think also you can exploit that a little bit to humans, because we are so addicted to patterns and pattern recognition. When there is no discernible pattern, the pattern doesn't make sense. That is also a form of anxiety. And that's what makes cosmic horror such a thing. And that's why H.P. Lovecraft is this thing, is like, you trying to find patterns in what I'm creating is the reason why you're doomed. And the reason why you will never understand. It's the whole idea of man was not meant to know certain things.
I think one of the things to add to that is, right, like a running gag that I'm sure folks have heard of, right, is putting an obvious timer in a setting where that's obviously a problem that I'm supposed to solve. And so you have player characters scrambling, trying to find a solution because obviously, like, I hit the button thinking it would open the door. Instead, the timer started and I don't know what's going to happen when the timer stops. The door opens and that was it. That was all that was going to happen the whole time. But as player characters, it's hugely anxiety inducing because you think I have to do something. And obviously I only have so long to do that thing.
I think that time-based anxiety that can be a really effective but difficult tool to use, since RPGs are typically like turn-based, and a lot in cases where time matters, it's usually in a turn order. Using time as a way to produce anxiety seems difficult, but I mean, it obviously works. Yeah, the sand timer thing would drive me nuts.
So I think there's two pieces of this, right? There's the meta for the players. And I think you're right. Like if you're trying to do something in the real world time-based, it's going to be hard because that's not the nature of the game. But if you can bring the time into the world of the player characters, I think that's where you can really have success. So if the timer is obviously roll survival, roll something, you get a good rollback and you get the feeling it's going to expire in about a minute. What does that say? That says they have 10 rounds to do whatever they're going to do, in which case, don't make it a minute, make it 18 seconds because, dear God.
Yeah. So as a human, there's nothing scarier than the concept of time itself. It's the enemy of everything. Do you say that it is difficult to bring in time mechanics into D&D? I disagree. I think there are ways that you can do it. And some of the ways that you can do it, you just have to look at other systems, really. Like there is this system I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Blades in the Dark, but they have this time dice. And based on like certain actions that you take, it reduces the time dice. So that still gives you the freedom of the, turn-based sort of structure, but it also has the ticking clock mechanic so that it's sort of half real time, half not. The other way that you can kind of do it is have a pressing, without like having an actual timer, have a pressing thing that's going to be happening and people know that they have to get there, but they have to decide whether it's worth it to press on and maybe risk exhaustion or something bad, or just let whatever bad's going to happen,
So you can definitely do in-world time or IRL time. If you're going to do something like I was talking about with the timer, don't try to do it in combat. Just do it during exploration. Trying to enforce real-world time on turn-based combat is absolutely difficult. And I guess technically speaking possible, but I wouldn't even try. Now, one interesting thing that time-based anxiety is really good for, and particularly it's like what Randall talked about, if you just keep people anxious, they will become inured to it pretty quickly. And so just like any other story, you need tension release. Doing something like a timer that then just counts down, scares people, and then opens the door they were trying to open anyway. Superb. That is a great way to have some anxiety for a while, give them a release, and then, make them possibly even like more afraid of, oh God, what is it going to be next time? Something like that. Really good way to get that going.
That is an excellent point. And I think the other thing that you can do with time is that sometimes you don't need to show people the timer. You just need to tell them that there is a timer, but you don't tell them when it's going to end. And that in and of itself can cause a lot of anxiety because it goes back to the sort of pattern recognition that humans like. We like to know okay, we have this much time to do a thing. If we don't know how much time we have, suddenly all of our priorities become skewed.
One thing I'm going to say, definitely, that's a great way to go. A thing that you might want to do to avoid triggering frustration instead of fear is, if you go that route, make sure that their penalty for failure isn't something that's actually all that negative. You know, don't give people an unknown timer and then like, oh, you dead, lel, because that's not going to end well for anybody. That's
right.
Not a good story.
Obviously, you want to have it a way out, and you don't want to just punish people for not knowing what how long the timer was. But even just having an arbitrary time limit and them not knowing can push them to make decisions they normally wouldn't otherwise. But yeah, I think you're right. You got to be careful not to just be like, figure it out or you're dead. Because that's not fun for anyone.
Well, and you talk about like pushing them into that anxiety. And I think probably the hardest part about doing this kind of storytelling versus a typical game is reading the room, right? Getting a feeling for like, okay, how anxious are you? Should I pop this cork and let a little relief, or do I need to keep building? And I think managing like the velocity. So we've talked about malaise and anxiety, and I think we're going to move on to the deeper feelings in a second. But, you know, managing, it's like, okay, you know, I've got you up to the top of anxiety, you know, almost to like our next feeling, which, you know, spoiler, dread. Let me pop it open. All right. So like the knob was jiggling and you heard scratching at the door, and then the door opened and it was the caretaker holding a rake, and everybody's like, oh, okay, good. It's the caretaker. And then something eats his head. Like that's, you know, that's exciting.
Classic. That's classic. Yeah.
Well, but it's classic because it works. Right?
Yeah, no, it does.
You get built up, you feel relief, and you're like, oh, okay, wait, what's that? No head. You know, roll initiative. Let's go.
Mm-hmm.
Well, one last thing I do want to touch on before we get past anxiety, for another.
We're never going to get past anxiety. I want to be very clear.
I'm anxious this entire podcast, so if you can't tell.
So another just like specific thing you can do to build anxiety, just as a, you know, not time-based thing. People are wandering through, you know, if they're exploring something, you've set them in a spooky area, it's hard to see, which, by the way, light.
Yeah.
Longtime listeners will know that I was in a very long Strahd game. One of the things that the DM said at the outset is, look, I am going to make light a very focused part of how we are playing this, because not everyone has dark vision. And even those who do have dark vision, you're seeing in black and white in, well, okay, that's more 3.5, but you're seeing as if it were low light, using light to good advantage. And don't be afraid to chuck some magical darkness in there, even if it doesn't make sense. Like, here's an item. It creates magical darkness. Why? Because I wanted the plot to do that. That's one thing. And then also, like, as you are exploring these scenarios, again, triggering the pattern recognition and people wanting to have their thing. Have your players roll perception. Don't tell them anything. Just like give a very explicit description of where they are. Try to lead them on a bit. Like, oh yeah, nope, man. You find this thing and this thing and this thing, and have them feel like they're missing something.
Yeah.
Be careful with that one too, because that can lead to frustration. Nope, you missed it, and then roll right on into your next story beat so that you have some stuff built.
Yeah, I feel like for a lot of these tools, and let's take this idea of like, I give you this detailed description of the room, including, you know, the frame that was slightly crooked and the desk with the door that's slightly ajar, and on and on and on. Like, I almost say as a DM, like, have a checklist next to you. And when you've used that trick once for the night or twice for the night, let's not do that anymore, because it will become frustrating. But you can put enough of these tools together that in the right moment, you know, okay, I know that this is an anxiety inducer, and right now I need an anxiety inducer. So where are my anxiety inducers? Okay, what do I got? Rolling behind the curtain and overly describing the pink curtains. Those are the tools in my bag.
Now, how much of that is delivery? The tools all make sense, but me as a person who just, like, I don't engage in horror as a subset of media in general, how much of that is just delivery by the DM? Like, Randall, your module that you read us earlier, the description was very spooky. I felt a little anxious and was like, okay, there's something spooky going on here. If I as a DM read that same text, the delivery would be very different. People they've heard of fashion type clothing is just like, oh, okay, these are just people who don't get fashion. Books that are sorted by color, it's, oh, these people have an interior decorator who bought them books by color. That's a thing that happens in real life. Like that, like all of that seemed mostly normal, except the delivery sold me on the horror. Like how much of all of this is just I as the DM am successfully using these tools?
So I'll challenge that, and I'll say that I don't think you're giving yourself enough credit, RPGBot. In order to do this, right? Like if everybody was laughing and having a good time and everybody just thought this was a joke, and I delivered that the same way that I just delivered it, people would still treat it like a joke. I wouldn't be able to build anxiety and the story wouldn't work. I think the most important thing is having a group of players who are excited about the adventure you're about to go on. You know, what we say all the time, right? The collective storytelling that we're about to do. And I think if you have those players with you, I think you could deliver that and absolutely give them the goosebumps.
I think you hit the nail on the head. And the thing is that you say that it's all about delivery, but that's most of exposition in D&D. All of it is about delivery. How do you deliver an awesome moment if your players don't really buy into it, or you yourself don't try to evoke those emotions? Horror requires a certain delivery, something that, like the module that Randall read. If he read it, like he's right. If he read it in a comical voice or people were treating it as like a joke, it would be like, you know, a scary movie. It's a scary movie does the same things that a lot of horror movies do. They just do it in a comical fashion. And that's just their shtick. So yeah, I think horror, more than any other genre, requires you to set a mood. It requires ambience. It requires you to deliver it in a way that unnerves people.
100%. And then, you know, not taking it into absurdity. Because as soon as you take like the anxiety into absurdity, then I think you do lose the room. And I'll bring up, like, what if you have one player who's giggling, laughing, not taking it seriously? You know, I'll steal a phrase from random. I think you try the social correction, pull them aside, say, hey, look, we all kind of wanted to come together for this. Can you kind of get into the game and try to keep this a little bit more serious this session? And if it's the whole campaign, is this really a campaign that person wants to be a part of? Or
if you want to be a bad DM, you just say, hey, you laughed so much and the monster killed you first. So congratulations.
But yeah, the social fix versus the mechanical fix.
Yeah, there you go.
No, that's attempt 2.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Roll. Oh no, you failed your death save. I don't know.
Oh, so sorry. You don't even. I don't get a saving throw. No, he just bites your head off. I'm sorry. Can you give me your character sheet now? Bye.
We're gonna burn
it. You've built this malaise. You've built this anxiety. What do you do with it? And you know, Randall did a great job saying you transition it to dread. Dread is more like, I know that something is coming for me. This is I am being chased by the serial killer. I am sliding down into the Silent Hill basement. Something is very immediately bad about to happen to me.
Yeah, if I don't jump out of this building through a tiny tube that I barely fit into, I'm going to burn in the fire. So I have to jump in the tube. For me personally, that induces significant dread.
This is where I feel like D&D lacks a bit in terms of making chases compelling. The chase mechanics in the DM's guide, I'm just going to say it, they're bad. They're not good. They're like good for maybe an Indiana Jones thing. They're just not very good for horror. If you want an idea of what a good system is, and a system that I've used in the past for D&D, take a look at the Call of Cthulhu chase systems. Those are really well done.
So how does that work?
So the way it works is you have a series of nodes on a line. So you can either pre-plan it or you can roll it randomly for each node. But basically you have on each node maybe an obstacle. Each monster has a sort of speed initiative based on like a number of factors like their dexterity and stuff like that. Based on how high their dexterity and stuff is, they get to move a certain number of nodes per turn. And you can do certain things to like slow or increase that based on the actions that you take using the abilities at your disposal or your environment. So let's say you're being chased by a monster down a hall and the first node has a locked door. So now you have choice to make. You can bust down the door to get through the node fast, but it also leaves the door open for the monster chasing you. Or if you're good enough and you think you have it down, you can try to quickly pick the lock. It might take you a little bit of time, and the monster may gain a node or two on you, depending on how good your check is. You get through the door, and that gives you the opportunity to bar it on the other side, thus creating an obstacle for the monster chasing you. So now he has an obstacle that he has to overcome once he reaches that node.
Okay, now what if the monster is a lock-picking monster?
If it's a lock-picking monster,
here.
Yeah.
No.
But most monsters just try to bust through things. But yeah, that's just one example. And it's one that I've used because I'm currently running a survival horror sort of D&D as my main campaign. And it works really well. If you're dissatisfied with the DMG's way of doing chases, I recommend giving the Call of Cthulhu chase things a try. It is a bit more complicated, but that complexity comes with depth.
Yeah, that sounds way more satisfying. Definitely.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's an interesting point you bring up. And I think that this is maybe something that just like a quick tangent. As you were talking about where delivery is such an important thing and buy-in is such an important thing, I think horror in particular as a game genre is something that you're really going to want to prepare more for than just your standard swords and sorcery, power fantasy, let's be 4 wizards murdering through the countryside. Because it is so immersion based, anytime you break that immersion, you're going to be losing a lot of what you've built. You know, if you are keeping your players on a good like tension release of anxiety, dread, and then back, having to take even a couple minutes to look through your notes is going to really kind of draw people out. Now, I'm not saying that you need to set everything up ahead of time, that you need to be the best, whatever. That is something to be conscious of, that if you are going to try and run a session or, an arc, more horror than other genres, be aware that immersion is a huge factor, and that if you are going to try and run this, have it planned like this, like Asher was talking about with this Call of Cthulhu thing, or even if you are going to try and I will admit, I chose, something chasing you just randomly. I had no idea there were rules for that in the DMG.
Yeah.
Great. Fascinating.
Give it a look. See what you think. Maybe you'll agree with me. Maybe you'll disagree.
But yeah, so yeah, that's sort of like, or I really like what Randall was talking about. Like, here is an immediate lose-lose situation. Any sort of jump into this claustrophobic tube or burn to death. So, something like that. I think either of those are going to be really good ways. And dread is hard because even if something is chasing you, which, in Call of Cthulhu, it makes a lot more sense because you're just a human and these things are cyclopean. I'm going to get stabbed for using that word, but such is life. They're meant to kill you.
Yeah.
In D&D, monsters aren't really meant to kill you. Making them scary, you kind of have to go back to some of those tricking your players things. Particularly any veteran players, they're going to look at a monster and they're going to go, oh, yes, I know what this monster does. And so you need to come up with something that they don't expect.
Yeah.
Because I've been fighting, a tree blight has walked out of the forest. He's going to kill me. And, someone says, it's a tree. I'm going to light it on fire. You light the tree on fire. It gets angrier. Now it's on fire and coming at you on fire, rather than, it being typically vulnerable to fire like somebody might expect. That sort of reversal can build some really immediate dread even in combat. I think that sort of making your monsters do unexpected things is the way to bring some of that back in when killing monsters is sort of a big focus.
Or just make new monsters.
And I think that's actually the right answer, right? So #Monsterizer. You can always take a monster and reskin it. And with the tool that's on RPGBOT.net, the Monsterizer, you can truly customize it. And if you need to level something up or level something down, somebody says it's like, I'm obviously way too high of a level to be worried about this tree hint that is coming towards me. And then they get into combat, and the first time they take a hit, they're like, oh, never mind, I was wrong, and I am in danger.
And that's the big thing about D&D, and why I think it is hard to do horror effectively. Just coming at it from a regular mindset, is D&D, at least 5th edition, is a power fantasy. And with horror, the way horror is effective is you need to feel powerless. The way I've done it in the survival campaign is I make fights literally unfair for my players. And I go from the outset saying, don't get attached to your characters because they very well may die. And it is often in your better interest to run from a battle than to fight it, which is a concept that takes some getting used to in D&D because you're not used to running from fights. But I think if you're going to do horror effectively, fighting should be your last resort. It should not be the first thing that you go to.
I think that's huge. And I think that's something you say in kind of a session zero, right? Like many, if not most of the encounters you're going to have, you are not meant to take the encounter full frontal.
Yeah, exactly.
So when you did Castle Ravenloft random, did you go into most combat and engage in combat every single time you ran into a monster? Or was there a lot of, running away, hiding, using trickery?
While it was in a spooky setting and the gothic horror was very strong and my DM did a really superb job selling us on it, in general, it's still 5th edition, right? It wasn't really modified 5th edition. It is a pre-written Wizards of the Coast module, so it's intended to be played like straight 5th edition. Now, with that said, we absolutely had encounters that beat us. If you have looked through, you may know that Death House is intended to be sort of a prequel to Curse of Strahd, if you want to do that.
Death House is awful.
One of the great things about Death House is, so because you start at level 1, you do kind of hit on that powerless end. And so you can have Death House actually feel like horror because me and my 10 hit points are all that's standing between, this character horribly dying, turning into a ghost. With that, I think I mentioned this when we were talking about in the skill feats episode. 2 of us died in the final boss of the Death House. That felt totally fair and also horrifying. That was just, there's my friend who I've been traipsing through this god-awful plane with for a week and a half, impaled on a wheel. Great. As things went on, it really did become much more of a standard D&D game. That's fine. That you can still use the spooky setting and use that to build narrative engagement and still have it be a typical power fantasy 5th edition game. That's good too. And I think Van Richten's covers some of this. You can also use other parts of Ravenloft to do other scary things apart from just your typical gothic horror. And, in particular, if you pick up Wild Beyond the Witchlight and you mash those 2 things together, that's all kinds of spooky. And would recommend. That's some good stuff.
Nice.
Creepy carnivals are always where it's at, man. I love creepy carnivals.
More people are afraid of clowns than vampires.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah.
Number 1 fear in the United States, clowns. Number 2, spiders.
It's the one session that I've always wanted to run is a creepy carnival. I was going to run it in one of my campaigns, but then that campaign died. Eventually, I will get to do something like that.
So this is kind of neat. And give me 30 seconds to spoil something from Wild Beyond the Witchlight. Van Richten's guide has a carnival that's mentioned in Van Richten's guide. It's the spooky Shadowfell Carnival. And the people that originally ran that carnival are featured in Wild Beyond the Witchlight. So if you go read Van Richten's and then read Wild Beyond the Witchlight, like intending to run it, hopefully you'll be like, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, actually, I'm not going to say anything other than I thought that tie-in and that story was really cool when I read it.
I like it how a lot of WOTC's supplements kind of feed off of each other. So that's really cool.
Yeah.
Right. What have we just said? We've said that it's okay if you play like a power-driven 5th edition D&D session in a horror or a spooky setting.
Oh, yeah, no.
But today's episode is about actually executing the horror. And so we were talking about dread and like, how do we bring in dread? And I think everybody nailed it, right? Like when you have super powerful player characters, or even moderately powerful player characters, if they go into a fight, unfortunately in 5th edition, either you have overpowered that fight to the point where they're likely going to lose, in which case that's not going to induce dread. It's just going to induce frustration because you as a DM have put them in a situation, made them think they should fight, and then they died. The alternative is saying, look, you need to run, session 0, you need to run from a lot of fights. If you're not 100% confident that you can win, don't engage, find a way out, and then run your session that way. Where if they test you, push them back. Maybe a PC just has to fall, but their backup cousin was sitting in a closet, and so you brought them out and put them into the game. But there's a lot of ways that we can induce dread. One thing that I love leveraging is if you can introduce a pet early on. Here's an NPC, and how adorable is this NPC?
Oh no.
100%. Absolutely.
The goblin.
I know where this is going, you heartless monster.
No, but it's super powerful because they're not going to feel dread for themselves because they know in combat they can take care of themselves. But if you put them in a combat situation or like a skill challenge type situation where something might happen to the dear NPC, they're going to do their best to rescue, and they're going to feel the anxiety and the dread that something bad might actually happen.
I like that idea. So I spent some time researching for this episode because I was woefully underprepared. The 3rd edition supplement Heroes of Horror is kind of like the 3rd edition equivalent of Van Richten's Guide, but instead of focusing on Ravenloft, it focused on just horror more generally. Random, you will probably remember this is the book that gave us The Archivist.
Also Dread Necromancer.
Yeah, there's some cool stuff in there.
Dracomancer.
So Van Richten's Guide has like 5 or 6 pages on how to run a horror game, and they're very dense and they're very good, and I recommend that you read them. Heroes of Horror has 85 pages on how to run a horror game. So in terms of sheer page count, there's way more ideas in Heroes of Horror.
But the question is it quality or is it just quantity?
A bit of both. Some of it is really good ideas. A lot of that is filled in with like examples of like, here's how to do this one thing in horror. And then here's like 2 or 3 pages of an example of how you would do this. So like, here's an encounter, here's an adventure, here's a stat block for a villain that you're going to face. And of course, the stat blocks are going to be totally useless unless you're already familiar with the 3rd edition rule set. But there are still a lot of good ideas in there. So Heroes of Horror on DM's Guild, go pick it up. I had a whole point to this that I was going to circle back to. Oh, it was the picking on the NPCs. That is one of the things that they recommended in there. Basically, because you can't threaten the players very much with direct action, like the monsters aren't a threat to the players. If a fight goes badly, they'll just teleport away, whatever. So you go and threaten their friends, their family, their pets. As long as no one came to the table with, my backstory is my entire family is dead and I have no friends, that can work.
Yes, the Sasuke Uchiha defense.
Jeez.
You talk about Heroes of Horror, and Descent into Avernus, actually, is something that I've been playing recently. And while we're here, so let's talk about mechanics that actually revolve around fear. 5e has sanity rules, which are really neat. They actually feel a whole lot like 3.x's sanity rules. Basically, you fail a save, something bad happens for a little bit, you have 1 layer of madness. If you encounter madness again, you fail another save, now something bad is going to happen for like a week to you.
So what are the kinds of things that would potentially raise your level of madness?
Well, so spoilers for anyone who may play Descent into Avernus at some point. Very early on, as like a level 3 character, Demogorgon appears and just wrecks a village that you run away from because they're Demogorgon and don't care about a party of level 3 people running away. In pre-written modules like this one, there are several things that explicitly trigger, like, here's what's going to be something scary. You know, maybe it's a cavern full of gibbering mouthers and they're just horrifying because they're whispering things that unnerve you or whatever the case may be. So these are things that you can put to use to have a mechanical effect on the characters as opposed to just affecting the players. You know, eventually the 3rd level, if you fail, the 3rd level is permanent. Your character now just has like a phobia or a tic or something, some permanent impression from the fear that the character has experienced. And so winding that in can be a really good tool. And while we're talking about 3.x, Rise of the Runelords game that Tyler has talked about me running for him, there is a whole section where you go investigate a literal haunted house. And Pathfinder had these rules for haunts, and they are super cool. You could very easily port them in. Basically, if a room is haunted, when you walk in, you get a perception check to maybe notice it's haunted. You have a much higher perception check to figure out what will trigger the haunt to occur. And then the haunt can be anything from, it's functionally a trap. It plays out like a haunted house, like a haunted area. And you're not able to disarm it like a trap because it's ghosts. So, there's actual rules for how do I exorcise a house, for instance.
Cleric plus holy water? What's...
Yeah, there you go.
I mean, there's some nuance to it.
Pick. Just
The short answer is it's not something that the players are expected to be able to do by themselves.
Okay.
That's one of the other cool things, and I would recommend reading up on those if you want to try and bring in actual mechanical fear instead of just building the ambiance.
So I do want to say, I think that is interesting to me, but if you engage in the sanity rules or you bring something like the haunts in, but you're not attempting to build anxiety, you're not trying to build that anticipation, I feel like it can feel hollow. And if that's the game everybody's coming to play, that can be fun. It would be great. But if folks are coming for horror, I almost feel like everything you do has to be attempting to affect the player first and the player character through them.
Talking about the insanity mechanics, it's interesting you bring that up because my hot take is I don't like the insanity mechanics for 5e. I think they're kind of boring, personally speaking. If you want a better system, one that I can recommend that actually has been tuned for 5e is there's this independent author, I forget his name, is Peter something. He wrote Cthulhu Mythos for 5e, and he created his own insanity system, which I've been using, and it's pretty interesting. Basically, you have 7 levels of dread. 7, I can count. 7 levels of dread. And each dread level is like how far gone your fear is. And they have different detrimental mechanical effects. Like maybe you have to roll to get closer to the object of your fear and stuff like that. Once you reach 4 levels of dread, then you get into insanity. And there are less insanity like conditions. Like the way it works in 5e is like you get a flaw for your character. Like permanent insanity conditions are basically like a flaw for your character. For these, there's less of those. It's like paranoia, schizophrenia, amnesia, other stuff. And it has like seriously detrimental effects depending on what you're running. Like some of them are brutal. Like amnesia, you lose all your class levels basically. And you're reduced to level 1 until you get your amnesia fixed. And you basically just start from scratch. One thing that I added to that system is if you, certain point, once you reach a certain level of insanity, because of the world that the game takes place in, you have a possibility of meeting what is called the rapture, which is a living embodiment of your own fears and insanity. And it's sort of like a living shadow that you basically have to fight against, or you just become an insane husk of a person. And people, because the world takes place in a world that's always in night, people call it dark madness. Like people go into the darkness and they go mad. And so using that kind of stuff to really sort of making, I don't know if I want to say torture is the right word, but maybe a little bit of torturing your players with some brutal mechanics can really sort of bring in the fear of like, rather than it's just an inconvenience or something they just have to like, live with now. That's like, oh, this completely changes my character and I don't want this to happen. I have to manage my stress levels.
So I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think in my mind, what would make that most powerful would be in session 0, pulling up the chart.
Oh, yeah.
And saying, step by step, this is what it is. This is how it is. Here's a couple canned examples of ways that your dread level or your sanity level might go up. And this probably works for either system, but almost over exaggerating how much you don't want this to happen.
Yeah.
Not because the consequences are drastic, but because you've hopefully put it into their head that when this happens, it is bad, and therefore it is going to help induce anxiety. I guess in either system, part of the takeaway I'm taking both from Random, what you described, Ash, what you've described, is whatever your world, just put things in the world and say this increases your insanity or this increases your dread, right? Mm-hmm. So if you were already, go back to my fire versus claustrophobia thing, right? Whichever one you choose, I'm going to say that this increases your insanity level because as a character, this is something that we've agreed you're worried about, or I'm telling you you're worried about. I own the world.
Yeah. Another thing you can do going off of that is if you're planning to run a horror game, ask your players this very simple question. What is your character's greatest fear? And then use it against them.
And we'll balance that with, though, having that session 0, the lines and veils, basically, like what are the things that you as a human being sitting in front of me do not want to talk about? and don't make that your character's greatest fear, because otherwise I'm going to leverage it.
Yeah, with horror and stuff like this, it's always important to establish like lines that are unacceptable to cross for your players. Like, okay, we're not going to cross these lines. These are our like hard set rules, because you don't want to make anybody uncomfortable.
Yeah, nobody should have to use a safe word during D&D. That's what I always say.
Exactly.
So if I can just touch on some safety tools there real quick. Randall, you mentioned lines and veils, which is an excellent safety tool in RPGs. For people unfamiliar, a line is a hard line that the game shall never cross. So if you say like this subject is a hard line for me, that line should never be crossed within the game.
Well, and to give real quick, I mean, to give a very serious example, you might have somebody at the table who says, never hurt children. Or no children, period. Like, we're going to have a horror game. Do not bring them in. As a DM or as a GM, honor that 100%.
Yeah. And like me and Colby ran an evil game, and one of the things we started out was, these are the few lines we're not going to cross. And one of those was like, we're not going to do sexual assault, because that's just not okay. And that's not something that we want to bring into our games. Stuff like that.
Yeah, 100%.
There are just lines that people are here to have fun. I know that the world is shitty. You don't need to remind them that the world is shitty.
Yeah, 100%. So good examples of lines, but you had one more.
Yeah, so veils are a little bit softer. So a veil is something that you're okay being in the game, but you don't want it specifically described. So that's a like fade to black moment. For me, real world example, terrified of spiders. I would probably declare spiders as a veil in a game. Like if the DM were to say like, and your character is covered in a mountain of spiders, I would be super not okay with that. And yet somehow random managed to run the demon web pits for me one time.
By the way,
you walked right into it.
So that afraid of spiders.
Yeah.
It wasn't a good time for either of us.
No, you
I
can't
that
tell.
module.
In defense of him, you can't tell him something like that and not expect him to use it. Come on.
That's why you use lines and veils, because it's an easy target, but there has to be a line. So for me, veils, if the DM were to say, hey, spiders happen, and I had established that as a veil, DM says spiders happen, fade to black, I'd be like, okay, I personally am, and my character, we are both now terrified. I'm sold on the horror. I've bought it. But I appreciate that I did not have to listen to a verbal description of spiders existing.
Yeah.
So your wife has to kill spiders for you, huh?
Oh gosh, no. We got cats because we were told that cats would hunt bugs.
Oh, yeah, I could have told you that. I mean, come on, man. No, don't get cats for that. They will never do that for you. I have a cat, and we had roaches when we were in Savannah, and she would like bat it around, but she wouldn't like kill it or anything.
To be clear, that's actually pro-cat propaganda put out by the cats.
Well, yeah, so the cats didn't work out. So now we just have a really good exterminator.
Well, to be clear, they kept the cats. Like the cats didn't work out for killing spiders. The cats are still loved.
They didn't serve their purpose. They're gone.
Yes. My cat appeared on the previous bonus episode, if you listen very carefully.
Yeah. I see also Dan has a cat in his lap right now.
Producer Dan, office full of cats. Always that time.
He's the perfectly sane cat fella. So what have we done? What have we talked through? We've talked about the roller coaster of emotion we want people to experience. We started with malaise. We want people to be uneasy. We want folks to know that the world isn't quite right, but not be able to put their finger on it, not understand why, not understand the negative that's going to come with it. We want folks to feel anxiety. We want them to be worried about the unknown consequences or outcomes that are in front of them, because that's what anxiety is, right? Like, we're anxious because we don't know what's going to go wrong. It never goes right for me. So surely this is going to be bad. That's an easy assumption. We want to build that into dread, which is anticipation of a negative near-term outcome that is going to be bad for my character and potentially bad for me, like spiders.
Like spiders.
And we've talked about a lot of great tools for building this. And I think the biggest thing that my takeaway from our conversation is that we need the players to experience this. If the goal is horror, if the goal is to induce dread and to get that endorphin rush that we all enjoy when we sit and we watch a scary movie, if we're into that. We need to have the players have that experience more than we need the player characters to have that experience.
Yeah, no, and I think that is definitely key difference between horror and just like anxiety-inducing situation in a more normal fantasy game, because like it's easy to scare players. It's harder to player characters. It's harder to scare players.
Yeah, 100%. But there's tools for it. I think we talked about some cool ways that you could do this within the rule set of 5th edition, and certainly bringing things from other rule sets and leveraging them to kind of play in your 5th edition game, so you don't have to have everybody flip to a brand new rule set just to have maybe one arc or one session. Definitely makes sense. But on the other hand, there's a lot of great content out there if you wanted to play. So one that we talked about already is Call of Cthulhu. It looks fantastic. I think it actually would be something I'd be pretty interested in.
It's a lot of fun. You should give it a try.
No, definitely. We talked about Death House. We talked about Ravenloft. One that we haven't talked about is the 10 Candles RPG.
I've heard of that.
Yeah. So this is an indie RPG from Cavalry Games that came out a couple of years ago. It is a horror one-shot game. Like, that is the premise of the game. You play the game sitting around a table in a room lit only by 10 real-world tea lights. And the mechanic of the game is, over the course of the game, you will gradually extinguish those tea lights. And the game ends when all 10 lights are out, at which point all of the characters die. And you go into the game with that expectation. Everyone is going to die at the end of this one shot. And the characters in the game know that they are about to die. They are essentially looking for hope in the last few horrifying hours of their existence. And everything I've heard about it has been absolutely wonderful, and I have been too scared to read it.
Definitely have to check that out.
We should actually just play it sometime. I think that's the answer.
I feel like that's a good answer. It would probably be good for me.
Yeah, cathartic, perhaps. Yeah. All right. Tyler, do we have a question of the week this week?
We do have a question of the week. I even wrote it down. And here it is. Okay, so this comes from Cursed Kenku on Twitter. Do you think 5e will eventually rework the once per rest mechanics in favor of X per proficiency bonus?
That's a very specific rework they're calling out.
Can you repeat that question?
Yeah, do you think 5th edition will eventually rework once per rest mechanics in favor of X number of times per proficiency bonus? So I think they're referring to more recent mechanics, which started appearing in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything, where like a class would have, I can do this thing a number of times per day equal to my proficiency bonus. And as we've seen, yeah, in my opinion, will we see a rework? Probably in the 2024 next evolution of D&D.
Yeah, I'm really curious as to what that is.
Yeah, there's supposed to be some announcements this month, and we're recording this episode before we get those announcements, unfortunately. But look for news about that in the podcast feeds.
But I get the feeling when it comes out, we're probably going to talk about it.
Oh, of course.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, so it's a great way to keep it as a limited number of uses per day without trying to balance around something like how many short rests a party might take, while still give you more than just once, because a lot of things at only once per day can feel really not impactful.
Yeah.
But, particularly one of my favorite instances of these is Flash of Genius off the Artificer. It is incredibly satisfying to use. It is always impactful. And, you're going to get it somewhere between, I think by the time you get it, you're already proficiency bonus 3. So you're going to get it somewhere between 3 and 6 times a day. And that's enough to feel like maybe that's once per fight, or, maybe that's, I'm going to use it a couple times in this really critical social encounter with the king of the realm or whatever. I think that they're definitely going to start heading that direction because it is much more satisfying. Because at once per day, you sort of run into that problem of like, yes, I've got this potion in the tutorial. I am never going to use it because I have one potion and I can't use it. Obviously, because what if I need it and I don't have it?
Yeah.
Right.
And then the other side of the spectrum, what is it? It's the feature that clerics get. I can't remember the name. Channel Divinity. Thank you. They get an absolutely pitiful number of uses out of it. It's only like max 2.
It is per short rest.
It is per short rest. That is true. But especially for clerics, some of them have like really situational Channel Divinity uses. and you're going to be like, I don't want to use it in case I can't get a short rest in. Like, I've played clerics before, and I think I've used my Channel Divinity, like, very rarely, because I'm always like, no, I gotta save it for this next thing. I don't know. I think, like, Channel Divinity could probably benefit from a proficiency bump.
So I'll ask the question, like, if you're a DM, why wait?
That's true.
Should folks just adopt this rule today?
Sure, yeah.
I would definitely be careful of that for the things that are currently once per day, because they are power balanced around X number of times per day. I can't think of a lot of good examples that are explicitly like once per day that aren't either racial based or on casters. Again, you're going to want to be really careful about who you're granting these things to, because in general, anything that's limited to once per day is already a thing where they needed to limit that to once per day because it's already strong. Maybe you look at this as like, okay, has this character gone through and picked a bunch of blue options? No, you get it once per day. Stop that. Has this character built someone who's interesting and maybe needs a little bit of a boost? Sure, let's give you proficiency bonus per long rest. Would I allow it case by case? But with a real heavy leaning towards I'm probably not going to, unless there's a good reason for it.
Yeah, I think there's probably a social cure here of having that conversation of like, okay, look, I noticed you never use this. Is it because you're saving it for when you really have to have it? In which case, I don't mind you having two of them, because just use the feature.
Yeah, especially if it's a really cool feature. And counter that argument, yeah, nothing balanced in 5e. And I'll quote Mike Morales. He says, I don't mind giving my players broken shit because I can break the game like 10 times more than they can as the DM.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
So it just kind of depends.
Yeah. Mutually assured. No, anyway. Awesome.
So I think the answer to this from everyone is yes, we're going to see more of this. If you want to backport it, case by case basis is a good way to look at it. My personal opinion, if it recharges once per short rest using the 1 time per proficiency bonus is probably a good transition. Like the Dragonborn's breath weapon is probably a good example of something that I would say, yeah, okay, once per day per proficiency bonus. Yeah, it really does. I'm really hoping Fizzbands is going to do a lot of great things for the Dragonborn.
Okay, I want to heckle on that, right? So I can cast Dragon's Breath, and then for a minute, or better, right? Or because this has actually happened on our game recently, I can twin spell Dragon's Breath. So I can touch two people, and for a minute, they can breathe fire.
Touch your familiar.
Yeah, and can breathe fire 10 times, but the actual Dragonborn gets to use it once.
Yeah,
and
but
it's a pitiful amount of damage. Like, it's so bad.
Well, see, clearly this is because sorcerers are better dragons than Dragonborn are dragons.
No, it makes me so mad. The Dragonline sorcerers are better Dragonborns than Dragonborns. It's like, what the wizards?
What if you're a sorcerer Dragonborn?
Yes, when you want to choose dragon for your race and your class. But we did have one very, very glorious moment in our Randall and I share a game currently where everyone in the party had a breath weapon for about 2 rounds, and it was spectacular.
Oh, that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it was a beautiful 12 seconds. All right. Well, I think we did it. I think that's a whole episode. Next episode, we have something really special. It's the culmination of Spooktober. We are going to do a horror one-shot. Yeah. All right. I'm Randall James. You can find me at amateurjack.com. Also at Jack Amateur on Twitter and Instagram.
I'm Tyler Kamstra. I'm already scared. You can find me at RPGBOT.net. You can find me on Twitter and Facebook at RPGBOT.net and patreon.com/RPGBot.
I'm Random Powell. You won't find me much on social media, although in places where people play games, I'm often there as Harlequin or Harlequint. But mostly you'll find me here contributing to RPGBot, both articles on the website and here on the podcast.
And I'm Ash. I don't have a lot of public social media, but like I said at the beginning, you can follow our podcast, my podcast, and Colby's podcast, Crit Fails, at Twitter at Crit_Fails. Colby kind of manages all that stuff. They just did Swordtember, where they put a bunch of custom swords every day for 30 days. So check them out, because They put a lot of work in.
Yeah, a lot of those were really great. Honestly, I might use a couple in my games. And Colby drew all of the art too, which was a surprise because
Yeah, they were exhausted by the end.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Nice. All right. Thanks to producer Dan. All hail the Leisure Illuminati.
Hail.
All right. You'll find affiliate links for source books and other materials linked in the show notes. Following these links helps us make this show happen every week. I think we talked about a lot of cool stuff. In particular, the Heroes of Horror from 3.5 is on DM's Guild. Go get it. Castle Ravenloft is also available. If horror is something that you want to delve into, there's a lot of great resources. And if you happen to buy them through the affiliate links, it really helps us keep doing what we're doing. You can find our podcast wherever fine podcasts are sold. If you enjoy this hot podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe and share it with your friends. If your question should be the question of the week next week, please email podcast@RPGBOT.net or message us on Twitter at RPGBOT.Net. If your monster should be the monster of the week next week, please message us on Twitter at RPGBOT.Net. #MonsterIsaac.